right. We're not going to talk about the Great Giza Pyramid today. Instead, we're going to talk about my model of the Great Giza Pyramid, my understanding of the Great Giza Pyramid. Well, no. We're not talking about the Great Giza Pyramid. Because we all know what the Great Giza Pyramid is. And obviously, I'm completely wrong. So instead, we're working on my model. We're going to have a water source. N1, N2, N3. They're up on the mountain, like 100 feet in the air. So, from above sea level. Okay? So, our water source is up there. Now, we don't need to have a big pool. I do feel that the way it was actually two of the sides had a pool there. That's going to be a large volume of water, and that would maintain, so whatever is happening at the entrance, the level of the water, because there's such a large volume, is maintained. And it will be constantly maintained at this elevation right here. So what that will do, which is also the exact same, but no water is there, as the elevation on the third of the largest structures, where the flat edge goes to the, what they like to call the unfinished, but I believe the whole structure is finished. That edge there. And what that will do is within the entire configuration of the structure, will maintain a water level throughout the structure. Actually, it would go above ground here, slice through the top of there, and it's actually above ground here, right there, so that the system's elevation is going to be just below the hump that's within the third structure. If I show you a horrible drawing, it would be just above that hump right in there. That goes up and comes down. And it has a hole on the east side that will be at an elevation actually down below it. It's not marked on here, but the elevation is down here. And that's because there's a separate pressure within the system as there is outside of the system. And let me work on that. So the way we add extra pressure in the system is two things. Up here, we're going to have a gas escaping, and we'll get into that shortly, and you're going to have the water in there. If we look at, if you go to pressure.greatgizapyramid.com, you will see a video, hopefully it's still there, where History in Granite shows you the area they found behind this right here. There's an area behind this. Now what that does is it makes it so the gas has to come out, fill the area, have enough pressure to come down and escape, and it actually, the gas is actually escaping through that opening, and the water is let in through that opening. And what this will do is create always within the system, that the water has to come down an extra like 6 inches below the inlet to allow a back pressure. Now there's also, the way there are two rooms within that one structure, and only a small 1.5 to 2 inch opening, about 18 inches long, will allow that as more gas is coming through, less liquid can come down. So the faster the reaction is working, the more it chokes it off. So it is self-regulating, just like we'll get into the area in the upper section here where it is also self-regulating. As the liquids within that room fill, it chokes off the inlet to the oxygen, which is coming in, 78% nitrogen, 1% oxygen, that encompasses the air in which we breathe. The oxygen burns together with the hydrogen to create the, I'm going to say, precipitation. It's going to be both water vapor and liquid, which will come down through the system like a pachanga ball and wash, rinse, repeat, constantly doing that over and over again. As that does that, since the weakest bond breaks first, we're going to have more and more heavy water, deuterium. That's a isotope of hydrogen. This system will be generating more and more heavy water as the system goes on. The way the lower section is devised, created, here I have an image of that right here. The lower section is devised in such a way that the oxygen, which is actually going to be venting off of, I'm going to look at it this way so I can see, this area here, coming up into the room, riding above the ceiling line and bubbling out. This area right here, if you get a close look at it, has like a little dog tooth on there. There we go. What that's going to do is it's going to make it so that as the dog is not a dog tooth. There's a stucco-y area, a lip, a flat area, and then the opening. The oxygen is going to take bubble in here and create an air bubble that works its way across. When it gets to here, it's going to bubble out. Water is going to come down, displacing the air bubble, oxygen bubble that bubbles out, and that's going to create the water hammer that creates the deposits that we see in the pictures from the 1800s. We're going to echo that. We don't have to do anything but repeat the design that they created. There, does that look more familiar to you? Okay, that's the lower edge. The stucco-y area here, that is designed because there are two gases involved, hydrogen and oxygen. The hydrogen is coaxed to come back into the room by having a channel within that stucco-y area, and the oxygen will come and do the rest. The hydrogen's coaxed back in, and that actually helps regulate things in one of the other structures. We'll get to that as we go through the system, but the hydrogen in here is actually playing with some of the stuff within the third structure. That's as we expand, but let's work slowly. The area here, it's going to have where then when there's too much gas, and to regulate the level of the water in there, the structure right outside of the pyramid, the most constructed of the Queen's pyramids, that one, if you wish, you go to karen.greatgizapyramid.com, you get a picture of the inside of it. It is designed to maintain a pressure which equalizes the pressure in there to allow gas to escape when there's too much gas involved, but maintain the water level within the system, which will bring the water level down to a lower elevation. That lower elevation will marry with, how did I lose? Oh, it's over here. Marry with the area within the second structure, which is down here. This is a poor image because there's a whole lot more to that area. It's not just a conduit. There's a box within there and a hole in the floor. The hole in the floor, as designated right here, and the boxed in area is going to let the liquid, maintained by the pressure of the outside, but to be brought in and just to spill into that area down in and just fill that area. Now this will make sure that it's putting, as I suggested, this system will create heavier and heavier and heavier water. We'll put heavier water down at below, and this particular pit, just how this one's venting oxygen, this one's venting hydrogen, didn't really get into that, but this one's venting oxygen, which is what I just talked about with how it bubbles out. This one's venting hydrogen, that hydrogen is brought up to the top, the same elevation as where in the third structure it marries the internal cutout, the area you see in the picture here, that area right there. At that elevation where the cutout remarries the skin, that's the elevation that the hydrogen is introduced into above, which is actually below where these two conduits are, because those two conduits are at the same elevation as the top of the third structure. But just pointing out the elevations, we'll get into the communication later. You don't, unless you see the analogies when I try to point out the communication, it'll escape you. But the hydrogen there is brought down in, comes through the pit in the back corner of the combustion chamber. That area is actually a flashback arrestor. The floor line of the King's chamber, actually where the hydrogen bubbles in, that is at the same elevation as the what's actually be right up there in the picture. That's where the hydrogen is introduced into there, mixes with the oxygen, like I said, from the outside, creates water vapor, because when it burns together, it's going to be water vapor. That water vapor plays within the system. It's trapped within that particular one room, except for when it has enough pressure, it's going to burst out like a steam engine would, bursting like a little bit of steam. Whoop, whoop. Okay, that steam's going to come up into here, condensate, and then come back down through the system and all the way down. Again, we can talk about how it plays a Pachenga ball game, and it's separated out such that the heavy water, the deuterium water, 1 out of every 6,800 particles, actually is coaxed into condensating within the arc chamber. The condensation chamber is what you like to call the Grand Gallery. That allows for condensation on the wall and to drip. As it's dripping, it's pulling static electricity. The static electricity, which I haven't even touched right now, is what's quarantined to the top and outside of the structure based on how it's built, with a sweeping pattern, just like if we had styrofoam and we put smaller and smaller grooves, we would pull the styrofoam to the top area where that is actually the catalyst for what starts the spark that joins the water together. The whole thing is a big symmetry of Mr. Wizard projects. That static electricity is also ambient on the outside of every particular droplet of humidity, the water vapor within the air, and is brought down within the system, which is why the Grand Gallery is built the way it's built, with the edges like so, that any water droplet comes down to the ends, forms a water droplet, and drops. Now, as it does that, it's by nature going to be pulling the static electricity with it. So by nature, the static electricity is brought down into the system to a lower elevation than it would naturally be outside in nature. Okay? That static electricity is used within the system and played with. I don't think it's harnessed, as Chris Dunn and others like to say. I think it's actually utilized, and we will, when we build the model, actually play with it and see what nature does. I'm not going to tell you what nature does. We're going to see what nature does, because I've learned that these guys know more about what nature does, probably from observation, like Schauberg and stuff, observe, and they isolate and coordinate. So what's happening within here, as the water is condensating and cooling, it's actually creating a less than ambient atmosphere. So it's going to be less than what? 11.2 bars of pressure, or 1 atmospheric pressure. Less than 1 atmospheric pressure. Because of the way the air has to escape, the oxygen has to escape here, it's creating pressure here. So the water, the meniscus on the water tension, has a power of more than 1 ambient astronomical unit, or 14.2, or whatever the number is, of foot-pounds of pressure. The surface tension has higher, the atmosphere has less. We're playing with nature. Then what we do, the way this all works, is right here where we tunneled through and found the conduit behind the wall. There was hypothetically like a small hole, like a 30 millimeter hole. So they're either milking off, the substance they're looking for is either within that chamber, riding slightly above, because the conduit's right here and they drilled through it, slightly above where it's below the hydrogen but above whatever the pressure to escape, or it's slightly below that where what they're looking for is pushing up against it, like but whatever it is, they milk it off right at that elevation. So whatever nature provides, whatever compound or whatever element nature provides. Now I gotta let you think here. I talked about isotopes. Isotopes, hydrogen and deuterium, are two different isotopes. They're a hydrogen with a electron spinning around. The other one is a hydrogen with a proton and a neutron with an electron spinning around. Okay, there's also from that there's a tritium, which is a proton with 2 neutrons with an electron spinning around. Okay, those are all isotopes of the same element. If we create an environment where one of these particular isotopes are more comfortable, and or we can get them to combine with the other things, the oxygen, which we all have, like oxygen 17, oxygen 18, blah, blah, blah. When we're playing with it, we're going to be getting different isotopes of these elements as well. And as those isotopes bond together, we're going to get isomers of different elements. And we all know, well, we don't all know, but I know, and the bubbly lady on the TED Talk knows, that just water itself, just water, hydrogen and oxygen bound together, have 74 plus different, they're not isomers, but they're different angles and vibration states. That's at 1 astronomical unit, at ambient room temperature. When we start adding in deuterium, and we start adding in different pressures, astronomical units, and we start adding in different temperatures, and all the other mixes, we are going to get different isotopes of elements, and we are going to skew the natural results of the ambient amount of particular isotopes of the elements involved. That is one of the things they're milking off of here. These guys understood science better than we do. And if you don't get that by now, you can drop out, but I'm going to continue. Down here, the heavy water they're milking off is brought into here, brought down, and then put into more pressure, because this is also venting, I believe, oxygen. I think this one's going back and forth between oxygen and hydrogen as different switches switch on and off. And we'll get into the switches later, but just trust me that a gas is venting, one of the 2 gases that are found within water. It's either oxygen or hydrogen. Only in this case, it's going to be oxygen or deuterium, because we're milking out the hydrogen out of the system as we play here. The more hydrogen we milk out, the more chance that the liquids in here are more deuterium than they are hydrogen within the water molecule or compound we refer to as water. Now, from here, because it's adding pressure down, it is raising the ambient water level. But we answer to that by taking the waters that are found within the structure and spilling them off the side. But we maintain for sure a water level, which is why there's a dam. You can take a look at it, drop your Google guy there and look at it. There's a dam, it comes up about a foot, and then it comes up about another 6 inches. So there, you can clearly see it. I don't have to put it there or fabricate it or make it up. That is to ensure that the liquids within there, the lighter liquids spill out, the heavier liquids maintain, but it ensures a water level which is just enough to have like an 18-inch foot to 18-inch pool around the area here, which is constantly fed from the water supply we were talking about. Now, we talked about how it comes across the top there, but it also comes, and one natural spill comes down through the center and spills down through the large big void pit that they find in there. That is our controlled ground we'll get into. That's right here. That's our controlled ground, so that we control the pressures and densities of the water, and then bring that down, spills over into the Sphinx and out into the Nile, okay, which is why it's shaped the way it is and why the waterfall is there. The other feed actually comes down, goes through the area that I like to refer to as the koi ponds that Jeffrey found, the Land of Chem guy. Now that is going to be at the same elevation as the waterfall, and there's another set a little bit lower that's at the same elevation, I believe, as this lip area there. But these are all designed so that the two densities of the liquids, the heavy water and the light water, and I think we're actually going to be getting into a different density of a different compound that we are not totally familiar with, because within the spillway of the within here, they are definitely separating out 3 different densities of liquids. And I feel that when we start looking at the big picture, one of the isomers, which are coaxed into existence because of the isotopes and the environment, are going to have a property where they are either more or less dense than the opposing isotope and isomer. And we are going to have even an additional state or density of water that we don't appreciate. Maybe people who work with, nuclear labs and stuff like that, where they get to play with heavy water, they say, well, there is sometimes we get a film across the top, but we just skew that off and throw it away. Well, that film across the top might be what we're talking about here, and that film across the top might have some properties that they haven't considered, but these guys did. They appreciated what existed. Anyway, so there is another density, and you can see that within the system. They're playing with some density. This whole system here, which pushes down on the liquid, allows something to rise to the surface. That something that rises to the surface is constantly maintained at an elevation where it is right here within the system, and it is set in such a way that they are taking the condensation. I believe that the water level is going to be above the ground level, so it's going to be like halfway up into that room there. That is where the pressure of the natural water level would be, but the water itself can't go up there because since it has density, it falls. It's creating a vacuum type environment, more so than this environment here, because it's got the weight of the water pulling against it. And there's going to be some condensation that occurs within this environment. Whatever that condensation is, they're looking for, the way that the room is constructed, they're looking for something just above the roof line of the hallway, and that maybe about 2 feet of area that whatever is condensating there, they collect, and you can see they channel it down and around. And that's not for baby sacrifices. It's condensation of something. That is channeled down and brought down, and I believe it is constantly broken and reconstituted until it gets to the point where the energy, just like how heavy water and light water, all the light water boils off first because it takes two additional millielectron, 0.02. It's 2.3 and 2.7, 2.5 and 2.7 millielectron volts. So it's 0.2 extra millielectron volts of energy to break hydrogen deuterium from water than it does hydrogen from water. And when you're running a voltage around there right at the cusp, you're going to, just like how you boil off the alcohol in a distillery before you boil off the water in, and you set your temperature at the right level so the one liquid doesn't boil and the other liquid does. With the electrolysis, they create a scenario so the one gas does break away from the oxygen molecule and the other gas doesn't. We today, take just multiple amps of voltage and force the reaction, so we're just going to break it regardless. But these guys have it on simmer, and by having it on simmer, they are taking the one gas out of the picture and leaving the other gas, and they leave it bound within the water molecule to bring it to the next level, and they do that again. And I think they are constantly refining here to get potentially a heavier than heavy water, or the way it's constructed, a isomer of heavy water that includes the isotope that they are looking for. That is then brought into the third structure, where it is maintained under pressure. Now, things that help to maintain the pressure, because there's also a byproduct that occurs here. How can I tell you there's a byproduct? Well, two ways. The area, the head to the Osiris shaft, that's located, if you take about 20% in of the edge and go down, bam, there's the Osiris shaft. That, which is set on the plateau askew a tiny bit so that it points towards the far corner over there. You don't have to make that up. I'm just pointing it out now, so when I tell you the communication later, you can say, oh, now I understand why they did that. Okay, that area there, it is a box, and I'm going to draw it as close as I can here. A box that comes up from ground level, and to descend into there, you have to go down a path that has an opening which is slightly below ground level. Now, I drew it at that elevation intentionally because these work in conjunction so that any additional gas, once this is constantly going to be breaking gas out of here, whether hydrogen or oxygen, because I'm going to tell you there are switches that go back and forth. But the gas that comes out of here, which is putting the pressure on the liquid, which is raising the ambient surface temperature so that the zero mark is actually above the surface area of the surface because it's constantly spilling off. So this water is confused. It's confused water, like I'm being pushed up, but I spill off. Okay? They're playing with that, which is creating condensation in here. That condensation is collected and brought in here. Any extra gas bleeds off into here until it creates enough pressure where it bubbles out. And that will maintain the pressure in here at the perfect pressure. Any extra liquid in here, which is a byproduct liquid, a light liquid instead of the heavy liquid, that its bleed off is a tiny bit further down, and it is the area that Larry from the Giza project website or whatever it is the circle within the square that looks like a sewer pit that comes up and is like 6-10 feet above the ground and has the circle within the square on the plateau within this pool. If you imagine that flooded like a pool, like if they put a dam and filled it up, that right there, that's your zero spot where any liquid within here would ride up and out and spill into the pool, because that's a byproduct liquid, where the heavy liquids would stay within it. And that's all done because this is all set, because water, liquids, find their balance within nature. And when you add a heavy water here, it's going to skew things, which is going to spill stuff off. You know, it's like when you add water and vinegar, if you had like a U-shaped thing and you add, the lighter the one, the oils to the top of it, the vinegar is going to push down and spill off the other side. But because it's less dense, now you're going to have where one is higher than the other. That's what they're playing with here. Is they're playing with nature to quarantine the gas and or light liquid that comes off of here, and the heavier liquid that comes off of here, which is then refined, and that is their glory compound, the glory water. And then the gas, which is within the system, it is maintained at less than ambient pressure. I think it's going to be a compound which is happy at less than ambient pressure, and we will probably find that when we find this magic gas or compound, or this either liquid that is lighter than water, less dense than water, or gas compound, that it may have been what gave them dirigibles. Or, maybe this whole thing somehow creates hydrogen, helium, but I don't think so. It doesn't look like it. I think helium is the byproduct, which is why that has that runner that goes up the side, and helium is actually squished out. When I look at this, I think helium is a byproduct, which means whatever the compound they're grabbing is actually better than helium. That's my opinion, based on what I understand of physics and gases and the densities of gases when you look at that density chart thing. They are creating a compound that we are unappreciative. Now, in addition to all this, they are creating these compounds and gases under different, what I'm going to call, energy states. This particular structure is all at a high static electricity state, kind of like that Westinghouse bubble that they had, where they put the big Van de Graaff generator inside of it and then played with stuff. This is all within Van de Graaff generator territory. This is the antithesis of that. And if or if not, there are pillars that go down 2 kilometers underneath. I consider them grounding rods, which help to take earth energy and vent it up through the system out into the ether. And in doing so, it probably promotes the condensation that they're looking for. They didn't do anything by mistake. Nothing is here by mistake. Nothing is here by chance. These weren't built separately. They were all built together at the same time, because they are all one system. And if you can't see that by now, by the way, this is the Osiris shaft, which is the only spot on the plateau that even today it goes down below the ambient water table, because that is the true ground of the system. Right here is the true ground of the system. Right in the center of it is the true ground of the system. That is the spot. You can see when you're looking at it where you want what you're looking for to have the closest path to ground. That is the pull that you're doing, and you're trapping it within that system, like if we had a one of these little plasma balls and I can put my finger close to it. You're taunting that stream of energy. However, it's more than the stream of energy. You're taunting the compound or isomer, isotope, of the body of elements that you're playing with, because you're toying with electricity. These guys understood way more about the compounds that encapsulate our world that we use today than we appreciate. I hope that this will piss off your history teacher and your science teacher and your history teacher. Did I say history? I don't care. Pisses them off. GreatGizaPyramid.com. Do I have to do the beep, 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 beep again? Let me do it again. Like, share, subscribe. Come on, help me out. I need 100 monkeys to understand this. It's not hard. 7th grade, you'll get the gist of hydrogen and oxygen within the compound we call water. It's a chemical process, you know. Thank you. Why are you still here? It's not only fair period of the day off. I'm not going to say anything funny. I'm not a fun guy.